10 or 12 years ago, my family was at a small church where the pastor presented a novel interpretation of Psalm 14, verse 1. I'm going to show you how to use blueletterbible.org to examine this novel interpretation. So we go to blueletterbible.org and type in Psalm 14.1 into the search box and hit enter, and that brings up the verse. We scroll down to Psalm 14.1, which reads, "The fool has said in his heart, there is no God." This novel interpretation revolves around the fact that the words "there is" are in italics, and the translators, at least for the King James and some other translations, the italics is used by the translators to signal to the reader that those words don't exist in the original language. They added them to help clarify the meaning. And this novel interpretation concludes that the Hebrew only said "no God," and therefore it could mean that the fool is shaking his fist in defiance at God and saying, "No, God." So we're going to look at the Hebrew to see if we can figure out whether or not this is actually a valid interpretation. We click on the Tools button next to the verse, which brings up by default the reverse interlinear. The interlinear shows us the Hebrew first, and then if we scroll down, it shows the English on the left and the Hebrew on the right. The reverse interlinear does that because the English is primary for the reverse interlinear. If we click on forward, the Hebrew becomes primary and the English is secondary, but we're going to stick with the reverse interlinear and scroll down until we find where it says "there is no God." And just as we expect, there's no Hebrew next to the English "there is" because it's not in the Hebrew. The Hebrew only says "no God." From here, we can then go to this link here, the H369. That's the Strong's number. It's the index into Strong's Exhaustive Concordance, which gives more information about the Hebrew word. We click on that word and that brings up the Strong's Concordance entry, and it shows us the Hebrew word. And if we keep going down, this is what we're interested in, the root word, the etymology. "As if from a primitive root, meaning to be nothing or not exist." So if we go back to the Hebrew for this verse, the word "no" means not exist. We've completely ruled out this novel interpretation. It can't mean that the fool is shaking his fist at God and saying, "No, God." It can only mean that the fool has said in his heart, "There is no God." That David's intent in this psalm was to communicate the foolishness of rejecting the belief that God exists. So I hope you found this helpful. If so, you might be interested in watching this video. And as soon as you subscribe, you're free to go.